The phone call came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, 2 months after we laid my father to rest. I was sitting in his study, surrounded by decades of memories, framed photographs, his collection of vintage fountain pens, the leather chair that still smelled faintly of his cologne. My sister and I had been taking our time with the estate, not out of greed or disagreement, but out of love. Every item we sorted through held a story, and we weren't ready to rush through our final connection to him. My father had built something remarkable in his lifetime. Over $5 million in assets, nearly half of it liquid. He'd worked himself to the bone, sacrificing weekends and holidays, building a legacy he could pass on to his children. To us. And now, as we carefully divided his life's work between the two of us, trying to honor what we knew he would have wanted, a complete stranger was about to blow our world apart. The estate attorney's voice was measured, professional, but I could hear the underlying tension. "We've received a rather unusual claim," he said. "A woman has come forward stating that your father had a secret child with her. She's demanding that the child receive 1/3 of the estate." The room spun. My father? A secret child? The man who had been at every school play, every soccer game, every graduation? The man who'd called us every Sunday without fail, who'd never missed a birthday, who'd been the most devoted father imaginable. It seemed impossible. And yet, for a brief, nauseating moment, I wondered if there was something we hadn't known about him. The woman, and I'll call her Lana, was apparently the daughter of someone my father had gone to high school with. That detail gave her just enough plausibility to make my heart race. Dad had been a social guy back in his youth, popular with friends who'd scattered across the country after graduation. Most of them we'd only heard about in his stories. Could this be one of those untold chapters? But then came the medical facts that changed everything. 15 years ago, my father had been diagnosed with testicular cancer. The treatment was aggressive and complete, both testicles removed. It had been a difficult time for all of us, watching him go through recovery, adjusting to the medications and their side effects. But he'd survived, and that's what mattered. The doctors had been clear, though: biological children after that point were a medical impossibility. So unless this mysterious child was at least 14 years old, the entire claim was physically impossible. Still, I needed to see this through properly, to handle it the way my father would have wanted, with dignity, facts, and proper legal channels. I agreed to meet with Lana, hoping that a face-to-face conversation might resolve this quickly. The meeting took place in my father's attorney's office, a wood-paneled room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the kind of heavy furniture that speaks of old money and older traditions. Lana arrived 20 minutes late, dressed like she was heading to a nightclub rather than a legal meeting. She didn't bring the child, thankfully. I'm not sure I could have kept my composure looking at an innocent child being used as a pawn in whatever game she was playing. 9 years old. The moment she said it, I felt something relax in my chest even as my anger spiked. 9 years old meant this child had been born 6 years after my father's cancer treatment made biological fatherhood impossible. The math didn't work. The biology didn't work. Nothing about her story worked. But Lana was undeterred by these pesky details called facts. She launched into her demands with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed this speech in front of a mirror. Her child's share, she called it, as though this boy had any legitimate claim to my father's estate. She wanted 1/3 of everything: the house, the investments, the savings, the life insurance. And on top of that, she demanded 9 years of back child support, paid in cash immediately. The audacity was breathtaking. This woman, who I had never seen before in my life, who my father had never mentioned, who claimed a relationship with a man who was medically incapable of fathering her child, sat across from me and demanded millions of dollars. She threatened to sue if we didn't add her son to the will. She spoke about her rights and what she was owed with the fervor of someone who'd convinced themselves of their own lies. My father's attorney, bless him, remained the picture of professional composure. He asked the obvious question: would she submit to a DNA test? It was the simplest solution, the one thing that could either validate or destroy her claims immediately. Any reasonable person with a legitimate claim would jump at the chance to prove themselves right. Lana refused. She had excuse after excuse. The test was too invasive. She didn't trust the results. Her son didn't need to prove anything. And then came the grand reveal. She claimed to have a secret letter from my father, some written acknowledgement of paternity that would make all this DNA nonsense unnecessary. "Show us the letter," the attorney said simply. She couldn't. Or wouldn't. The letter was in a safe place. She needed to retrieve it from storage. She'd bring it next time. The excuses piled up like snow in a blizzard, each one less believable than the last. My father's attorney had clearly dealt with this type of person before. He stood up, his voice firm but not unkind, and told her in no uncertain terms to leave and not return until she was prepared to submit to a DNA test. That was the only path forward. No test, no negotiation, no estate claim. Lana erupted. She screamed about how we were stealing from her son, how my father had promised to take care of them, how she'd get a lawyer who would take us for everything we had. She threatened lawsuits, court battles, and public scandals. "You'll see me in court," she shrieked as she stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the law degrees hanging on the wall. I sat there in the aftermath, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. This woman was trying to steal from us. Not just money, but our father's legacy, his memory, his final wishes. Everything he'd worked for his entire life, she wanted to snatch away with a lie so transparent a child could see through it. I turned to the attorney, desperate for options. What can I do to make her go away? What kind of legal action can we take? If she does sue, how do we make sure she faces consequences for this? His advice was simple but frustrating: let him handle it. He'd send her a letter making it clear that all contact should go through him, not through me or my sister. Any attempts to reach us directly would be considered harassment. If she wanted to pursue her claim, she knew what she had to do: take the DNA test. Until then, we would not engage with her in any way. Block her number, he advised. Don't respond to any messages, emails, or attempts at contact. Forward anything she sends to me. If she sues, the estate will handle it, and trust me, with the facts on our side, this won't go far. It was sensible advice, but it felt passive. I wanted to fight back, to protect what was ours, to defend my father's name against these lies. But I also knew that engaging with someone like Lana would only feed into whatever drama she was trying to create. So I followed his instructions. I sent her one text message, clear and direct: "Stop contacting me. All communication must go through my father's attorney." Then I blocked her number. The response was immediate and unhinged. My phone started buzzing within minutes as her calls went straight to voicemail. I unblocked her briefly to see what she was saying, and found a stream of increasingly desperate and angry messages. Texts in all caps. Voicemails where she alternated between sobbing about her poor son and threatening to destroy us in court. I saved everything, documenting her harassment, and forwarded it all to the attorney. The next day, my father's attorney sent Lana an official letter. He showed me a copy, and while it was wrapped in the formal language of legal correspondence, the message was crystal clear. I'll summarize the key points. She needed to submit to a DNA test if she wanted her claim taken seriously. If, and only if, the test proved paternity, they would discuss child support according to state law. However, regarding the estate itself, my father's will explicitly left everything to his two children, me and my sister. Without the mysterious letter of recognition she kept mentioning, they would consider her child either disowned or unacknowledged, even if paternity were somehow proven. She was advised to get her own lawyer. The letter also addressed her continued harassment of me and my sister, strongly suggesting she cease all contact immediately. We'd made it clear we wanted nothing to do with her outside of proper legal channels. Further contact would result in legal action against her for harassment. But the best part, the part that made me smile for the first time since this nightmare began, was the ending. The attorney essentially gave her an out. If her claims were misinformed or fraudulent, she should admit it now and walk away. Otherwise, she'd not only receive a bill for his time, but we would pursue legal action against her for attempted fraud. While this was happening, my sister had been doing some detective work. She'd managed to track down Lana's parents through social media and old high school connections. The conversation she had with them was illuminating and disturbing in equal measure. Lana had been estranged from her family for years. They'd tried to maintain contact, tried to help her, but she'd burned every bridge she had. And then came the bombshell: this wasn't her first time pulling this scam. When her son was born 9 years ago, she'd targeted another man with the same claims of secret paternity. She'd threatened, harassed, and demanded until he'd paid her off just to make her go away. It was her playbook, her con, her way of making money. My sister forwarded all of this information to the attorney. Now we had a pattern, a documented history of this exact behavior. Lana wasn't a desperate mother trying to secure her child's birthright. She was a con artist who'd found a vulnerability, a recently deceased man with a substantial estate, and was trying to exploit it for profit. I didn't sleep well that night or the next few nights. Every time my phone buzzed, I tensed up, expecting another escalation. I kept replaying the meeting in my mind, her entitled demands, her transparent lies. I thought about that 9-year-old boy being used as a prop in his mother's scam, and felt sorry for him even as I resented the situation he represented. Then, for days after that letter was sent, my phone rang. It was the attorney. His voice had a note of satisfaction I hadn't heard before. "It's over," he said. "Lana has retracted her statements. She claims she misunderstood the situation and no longer believes her son is your father's child." I sat down hard, the relief washing over me like a wave. She's backing down? Just like that. Just like that. I suspect the letter made it clear that we had her dead to rights. Between the medical impossibility, her refusal to test, the missing letter, and now evidence of prior similar behavior, she knew she had no case. She's cutting her losses. For 2 blissful weeks, I allowed myself to believe it was truly over. My sister and I went back to sorting through Dad's belongings, dividing up the family photos, deciding which pieces of furniture held too many memories to sell. We laughed together for the first time since the funeral, sharing stories about Dad that made him feel present again. The estate settlement was moving forward smoothly. Life was returning to something resembling normal. Then Lana came roaring back into our lives like a Category 5 hurricane. It started with an email, not to the attorney this time, but directly to me. She'd somehow gotten my personal email address, probably through some social media stalking or public records search. The subject line read, "You owe my son." The message inside was a rambling, barely coherent rant about how she'd been bullied by our lawyer, how she'd been intimidated into backing down, and how she'd found a new attorney who told her she had every right to pursue this claim. I forwarded it to our attorney immediately, my hands shaking with renewed anger. "We'd been here before. I thought we were done with this." "Ignore it," he advised. "She's fishing for a reaction. Don't give her one." But Lana wasn't done fishing. The next day, she showed up at my father's house, the house that was still technically part of the estate, the house where my sister and I had been sorting through a lifetime of possessions. I was there alone, packing up Dad's office, when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and felt my blood run cold. Lana stood on the porch, and this time she had her son with her. The boy looked uncomfortable, clutching his mother's hand and staring at his shoes. She was holding her phone up, clearly recording video. I didn't open the door. "You need to leave," I called through it. "You're trespassing on private property." "This is my son's house," she screamed, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "You're the one who's stealing. Your father promised to take care of us." "He promised." The boy tugged at her arm, clearly embarrassed, but she ignored him. She started pounding on the door, demanding to be let in, claiming she had a right to inspect her son's inheritance. She threatened to call the police and report me for trespassing on my own father's property. I called the police myself, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I also called our attorney and started recording video from my phone through the window. Lana continued her performance on the porch, alternating between tears and rage, playing the part of the wronged woman for any neighbors who might be watching. The boy just stood there, looking like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. The police arrived within 10 minutes. Lana immediately switched tactics, suddenly calm and composed, explaining that she was just trying to talk to me about her son's inheritance. She claimed we'd been ignoring her, that we'd stolen from her child, that she just wanted what was fair. The lies rolled off her tongue as naturally as breathing. When the officers asked if she'd filed a legal claim, she became vague. "I'm working with attorneys," she said, which I knew was a lie. "But these people won't even talk to me." I showed the officers my father's will, the attorney's letters, the documentation of her previous retraction. I explained the medical impossibility of paternity, the refusal to submit to DNA testing. One of the officers recognized the situation immediately. Apparently, scammers targeting estates weren't uncommon. They asked Lana to leave, warning her that if she returned, she'd be arrested for trespassing and harassment. She left, but not before screaming that we'd regret this and that she'd make sure everyone knows the truth. The boy followed her to the car, his head down, shoulders slumped. I felt a pang of sympathy for him, caught in his mother's web of delusion and greed. "You should document everything," one of the officers advised. "If she keeps this up, you'll want a restraining order. And if she's asking for money and threatening you if you don't pay, that could be extortion." That should have been the end of it, but Lana was clearly operating on a different playbook now. She wasn't stupid enough to actually file a lawsuit she knew she'd lose. Instead, she'd wage a war of attrition, making our lives miserable until we paid her to go away. It was exactly what she'd done to the previous man she'd scammed, harass until they give in. Over the next 3 weeks, the harassment campaign intensified. She created multiple fake social media accounts to leave comments on my and my sister's profiles, posting things like "thieves who steal from children" and "taking advantage of a dead man who can't defend himself." She never used our names, but tagged us in posts with vague accusations that anyone who knew us could figure out. She found out where I worked and started calling my office, asking to speak with me about a family matter. When my assistant said I was unavailable, Lana would launch into a sob story about how I was keeping her son from his inheritance. It got to the point where my assistant had to block her number, but she'd just call from different phones. My sister had it worse. Lana discovered where she worked, a small dental practice where everyone knew everyone. She showed up in the waiting room one day claiming to be a patient, and when my sister came out between appointments, Lana created a scene. She stood up, pointed at my sister, and announced to everyone in the waiting room that she was looking at someone who stole from an orphan child. The office manager called the police and Lana left before they arrived, but the damage was done. My sister was humiliated in front of patients and co-workers. She came home that night and broke down crying. "Why won't she just go away?" she sobbed. "Dad's only been gone 3 months, and this woman is turning his memory into a circus. And the worst part is she's never going to actually sue us because she knows she has no case. She's just going to keep doing this forever, trying to make us pay her to stop." That's when I realized my sister was right. Lana wasn't after justice or even a legal settlement. She wanted extortion money, plain and simple. She'd learned from her previous scam that going through courts was risky, DNA tests don't lie, and judges don't appreciate fraud. But harassment? Harassment was low risk and potentially high reward. Make someone's life miserable enough and they'll pay you to stop. Our attorney was less rattled but clearly frustrated. "Unfortunately, she's being smart about it in a twisted way," he explained. "She's staying just on this side of legal action, posting vague things on social media, showing up at public places, calling your work. It's harassment, but it's harder to get a restraining order when she's not making direct threats." "So what do we do?" I asked, feeling helpless. "We document everything. Every post, every call, every appearance. And we get ahead of this. We file for a restraining order based on the pattern of behavior and the trespassing incident. It might not be granted immediately, but it puts her on notice. We also send her a final letter, one that makes very clear that her behavior constitutes criminal harassment and attempted extortion. We include information about the penalties for those crimes. Sometimes making someone realize they could actually face jail time is enough to make them back off." "And if it's not enough?" my sister asked. "Then we go to the police and the district attorney's office. We present everything we have and ask them to investigate. Extortion is a crime, and if we can prove a pattern, which we can with her previous victim willing to testify, they might prosecute." The next day, our attorney sent what he called the nuclear option letter. It was 10 pages long, meticulously documenting every instance of harassment, every false claim, every attempt at intimidation. It included screenshots of her social media posts, call logs from our workplaces, and police reports from the trespassing incident. Most importantly, it included a statement from the man she'd scammed 9 years ago. He'd provided a detailed affidavit about her pattern of behavior, the initial claim of paternity, the refusal to test, the escalating harassment, and finally, the demand for $50,000 to make it all go away. He explained how he'd paid her out of desperation, only to later discover he'd been out of the country during the entire conception window. He couldn't possibly be the father, but by the time he'd realized the scam, she'd already disappeared with his money. The letter spelled out potential criminal charges: harassment, stalking, defamation, attempted extortion, fraud. It explained that extortion in our state carried penalties of up to 5 years in prison. It noted that SB's pattern of behavior across multiple victims suggested this wasn't a misunderstanding but a deliberate criminal enterprise. And then it gave her one final ultimatum: cease all contact immediately. Remove all social media posts. Provide a written statement retracting her claims. Do this within 7 days and we'd consider the matter closed. Fail to comply and we'd pursue both civil and criminal action against her. For 48 hours there was blessed silence. No calls, no emails, no social media posts. I dared to hope that maybe, finally, the threat of actual consequences had gotten through to her. Then my sister's car was vandalized. She came out of her apartment one morning to find all 4 tires slashed and the word thief keyed into the driver's side door. There were no security cameras in the parking lot, no witnesses. But we all knew who was responsible. My sister was terrified now. "She's escalating," she said, her voice shaking. "What if she doesn't stop at property damage? What if she comes after us physically?" That was the moment I stopped being afraid and started being angry. Really, truly angry. This woman had harassed us, lied about us, tried to steal from us, and now she was destroying our property. All because we wouldn't pay her extortion money. All because we dared to stand up to her con. I called our attorney, then I called the police, and then I made a decision. We were going on offense. The police took a report on the vandalism. Though they admitted without evidence directly linking Lana to the crime, there wasn't much they could do. But it was another piece of documentation, another incident in the pattern. Our attorney took everything: the letter sent days before, the sudden silence, the vandalism clearly meant as retaliation, and filed an emergency petition for a restraining order. We also went to the district attorney's office. Our attorney had connections there, and he arranged for us to meet with a prosecutor who specialized in fraud and extortion cases. We brought everything: the timeline of events, her previous victims' testimony, evidence of her demands for money, documentation of the harassment campaign, the vandalism report. The prosecutor, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, listened to everything. When we finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "I'll be honest with you. Cases like this are hard to prosecute because the burden of proof is high. But what you've got here is a pattern. The prior scam, the refusal to pursue legitimate legal channels, the demands for payment, the harassment when you refused, that tells me this isn't about a child's inheritance. This is a shakedown." "Can you do anything?" my sister asked, desperation in her voice. "I can open an investigation. I can bring her in for questioning. Sometimes just knowing that law enforcement is watching is enough to make these people back off. And if she continues, if she makes any more direct demands for money or any more threats, we'll have enough to charge her." The restraining order hearing was scheduled for 1 week later. In the meantime, the silence from Lana was deafening. No more calls, no more posts, no more showing up at our workplaces. Either the district attorney's investigation had scared her, or she was plotting her next move. The hearing itself was anticlimactic. Lana didn't even show up, which meant she either didn't take it seriously or had finally gotten the message. The judge reviewed our evidence: the harassment, the trespassing, the workplace disruptions, the vandalism that occurred right after our attorney's letter. "This is a clear pattern of harassment," the judge said. "I'm granting a temporary restraining order valid for 1 year. The respondent is to have no contact with either petitioner, directly or indirectly. No phone calls, no emails, no social media contact, no showing up at their homes or workplaces. If she violates this order, she will be arrested immediately. She'll be served with this order by law enforcement." My sister squeezed my hand. It wasn't a complete victory. Lana was still out there, still convinced she was owed something, but it was protection. Legal protection with real consequences if she violated it. 2 days later, our attorney received a phone call from a lawyer claiming to represent Lana. But this wasn't about filing a lawsuit. The lawyer explained that his client wanted to resolve this matter amicably and was willing to drop all claims in exchange for a nominal settlement of $50,000. Our attorney's response was swift and brutal. "Your client has been served with a restraining order. She is currently under investigation by the district attorney's office for extortion and fraud. The only settlement she's getting is the bill for my fees when we sue her for harassment. If she contacts my clients again in any way, including through you, she will be arrested. Are we clear?" There was a pause, then the lawyer said, "I'll advise my client accordingly," and hung up. Our attorney later said he suspected Lana didn't actually have a lawyer. It was probably a friend or maybe even Lana herself trying to sound official. One last desperate attempt to get money out of us. After that, the silence was real and lasting. No more calls, no more harassment, no more showing up at our homes or jobs. The social media accounts went dark. It was like Lana had finally realized that we weren't going to break, and that continuing down this path would land her in jail. The district attorney's investigation continued for another month. Eventually, the prosecutor called to tell us that while they had enough to charge Lana with harassment, the extortion charge was harder to prove beyond a reasonable doubt because all her demands for money had been verbal or implied rather than written. They'd offered her a deal: plead guilty to misdemeanor harassment, accept probation, and agree to have no contact with us ever again. In exchange, they'd drop the extortion investigation. Lana took the deal. She was sentenced to 1 year of probation, 100 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution for my sister's car damage, $3,000 that we'd never actually see, but it was on record. Most importantly, the restraining order remained in place, and her probation terms included staying away from us. If she violated either the restraining order or her probation, she'd go to jail. My sister and I finally finished settling Dad's estate in peace. We established the scholarship fund we'd planned, donated to his favorite charities, and divided his possessions with love and care. We kept the house in the family, deciding to rent it out rather than sell it. It held too many memories to let go of completely. Looking back now, I understand her strategy perfectly. She never intended to file a legitimate lawsuit because she knew she'd lose. The DNA test would prove her son wasn't my father's child. The medical records would prove biological impossibility. She'd be exposed as a fraud in open court. So instead, she tried to make our lives so miserable that we'd pay her to go away. It had worked on her previous victim, so why not try it again? She'd probably thought we'd be easy targets, young, grieving, inexperienced with this kind of harassment. Pay her $50,000 or $100,000 or $200,000 and she'd disappear. It would be cheaper than legal fees and would make the nightmare stop. But she'd miscalculated. We had the resources to fight back, an attorney who knew how to handle her type, and the stubborn determination not to let anyone steal from our father's legacy. We'd also documented everything from the start, which made it impossible for her to claim she was the victim. I still think about that 9-year-old boy sometimes, now probably 10. I hope he's okay. I hope he doesn't know the full extent of what his mother did, using him as a prop in her extortion schemes. I hope someday he escapes her influence and builds an honest life for himself. He's as much a victim in this as we were, maybe more so. When other people started asking questions about that woman who claimed to be related to your dad, we could honestly say that the courts had handled it, that she'd been found to have no legitimate claim, and that she'd been prosecuted for her harassment. Her attempt to destroy our father's reputation had failed completely.